2:41 p.m. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned Russian forces they face a fight to the if they try to occupy the capital Kyiv, as air raid sirens again woke residents on Sunday morning. If they decide to carpet and simply erase the history of this region and destroy all of us, then they will enter Kyiv. If that's their goal, let them come in, but they will have to live on this land by themselves, Zelensky said on Saturday. The president, who has repeatedly appeared on social media from the capital, said some small towns no longer existed in the third week of Russian attacks, the biggest assault on a European country since World War II. Russian shelling has trapped thousands of people in besieged cities and sent 2.5 million Ukrainians fleeing to neighbouring countries. The relentless assault on the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol continues, as Russian forces shell the city's downtown, including an area around a mosque that was sheltering more than 80 people, some children. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Moscow had warned the United States that Moscow could attack convoys carrying military equipment to Ukraine, calling them legitimate targets. US President Joe Biden announced additional aid to Ukraine of up to $200 million for weapons, military services, education, and training. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky decried the Russians, who he accused of kidnapping a local mayor, as being like ISIS terrorists. Ukrainian Presidential Press Office. Russian units fanned out to prepare for an assault on Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. Zelensky said Russia would need to carpet Kyiv and its residents to take the city. Here are some key things to know about the conflict. What are Putin and Zelensky saying? Putin participated in a 90-minute phone call on Saturday with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Macron's office said the call was very frank and also difficult. The Kremlin said Putin laid out his demands for ending the war, including Ukraine's demilitarization. Moscow has also demanded that Ukraine drop its bid to join NATO, adopt a neutral status, and acknowledge Russian sovereignty over Crimea, among other things. Putin also threatened to seize the assets of US and Western companies that have announced plans to leave Russia. Zelensky again deplored NATO's refusal to declare a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He said Ukraine had sought ways to procure air defense assets, though he didn't elaborate. Zelensky also told Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that he would be open to meeting Putin in Jerusalem to discuss an end to the war, but that first there would have to be a ceasefire. Putin has ignored Zelensky's previous offers to talk. Ukraine will stand this test. We need time and strength to break the war machine that has come to our land, Zelensky said during his nightly address to the nation on Saturday. What is happening in besieged Mariupol? Russian shelling of this Ukrainian port city of 430,000 has been relentless, and the mayor's office says more than 1,500 have since the siege began. Russian forces hammered the city's downtown on Saturday as residents hid. The Ukrainian government said a mosque where people sought shelter in the city's center was shelled. However, an unverified Instagram post by a man claiming to be the Mosque Association's president said the mosque itself wasn't hit, but fell about 700 meters away. The Ukrainian embassy in Turkey said 86 Turkish nationals, including 34 children, were among those who had sought safety in the mosque. Repeated attempts to bring food to Mariupol and evacuate civilians have been cancelled due to ongoing Russian fire. The unceasing shelling has even interrupted efforts to bury the in mass graves. On Saturday, a Ukrainian official said Russian soldiers blocked a humanitarian convoy headed for Mariupol and stole from another. Doctors Without Borders said some residents were dying for lack of medication, with the city without drinking water or medicine for more than a week now. The aid group says people are resorting to boiling water from the ground or extracted from heating pipes. Ukraine's military said Russian forces captured Mariupol's eastern outskirts. Taking Mariupol and other ports on the Azov Sea would be strategic for Putin, as it could allow Russia to establish a land corridor to Crimea, which it seized from Ukraine in 2014. An Associated Press journalist witnessed tanks firing on a 9-story apartment block in Mariupol and was with a group of medical workers who came under sniper fire on Friday. Conditions at a local hospital there were deteriorating. Electricity was reserved for operating tables and the hallways were lined with people with nowhere else to go. Anastasia Ereshova wept and trembled as she held a sleeping child. Shelling had just her other child as well as her brother's child. No one was able to save them, she said. In Irpin, on the northwest outskirts of Kyiv, bodies laid in the open in a park and on a street on Saturday. Sergei Protsenko walked his neighborhood as explosions sounded. When I woke up in the morning, everything was covered in smoke, everything was dark. We don't know who is and where, he said. We don't have any radio or information. What else is happening on the ground? In the northeast, Russian forces were blockading Kyiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, even as efforts have been made to create new humanitarian corridors around it and other urban centers. Ukraine's emergency services reported that the bodies of 5 people were pulled from an apartment building that was struck by shelling in Kyiv, including 2 women, a man and 2 children. In multiple areas around Kyiv, heavy artillery fire sent residents scurrying for shelter as air raid sirens wailed. An ammunition depot outside the city was shelled overnight, sending billowing black smoke into the sky, according to video provided by emergency workers. Britain's defense ministry said Russian ground forces that had been north of Kyiv for most of the war had edged to within 25 kilometers of the city center and spread out, probably to support an attempted encirclement. The most vulnerable. Ukraine's chief prosecutor's office says at least 79 children have been since the invasion began on February 24. At least 2.5 million people have fled the country, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency. About 60 child cancer patients from Ukraine boarded a medical train on Saturday in Medyka, Poland, bound for hospitals in Warsaw and elsewhere. Medical workers carried some children in their arms, on stretchers, and pushed them in wheelchairs at the train station near the Ukrainian border. Dominic D'Souza, an anesthesiologist from Warsaw Hospital, said the train had so far transported 120 children with cancer. Ukraine's defense ministry said on Saturday that Russian forces shelled a convoy of refugees fleeing Peremogha, a village about 20 kilometers northeast of Kyiv, in 7 people including a child. The 7 were among hundreds of people who tried to leave Peremogha. An unknown number of people were wounded, the report added. Moscow has said it would establish humanitarian corridors out of conflict zones, but Ukrainian officials have accused Russia of disrupting those paths and firing on civilians. Elena Yurchuk, a nurse from the northern city of Chernihiv, was in a Romanian train station on Saturday with her teenage son, Nikita, doubting that their home was still standing. Her hometown has been heavily shelled. We have nowhere to go back to. Nothing left, said Yurchuk, 44, who hopes to find work in Germany.